Okay, this is Dave Lambert from the Justice System Training and Research Institute. We're going to take a look at ArcGIS Pro's new user interface. It's a little bit different than ArcMap, so we want to go over it a little bit. ArcGIS Pro has developed this interface that looks very similar to some of the other applications, such as Microsoft Word, etc. It's basically set up as a ribbon style, so it's got all these different types. It's got the project feature. It's got a map tab, an insert tab. So it's set up its functions a little bit differently than ArcMap, for instance. So it's a little cleaner, it's a little bit easier to use, but the functions are all in different places. So you're going to have to get used to sort of unlearning ArcMap and where you found things and get to a situation where you understand the different tabs that are set up in this new type of system. So basically the graphical user interface is set up in a way that, again, it's familiar with how we use other applications, but some of the tabs and commands only appear. For instance, the map tab will only appear if we actually have a map open. So you won't necessarily have the same tabs depending on what you're working on. A layer in the Contents tab has to be selected before the Labeling tab and the Symbology pane are shown, for instance. Again, we talked a little bit earlier about the Project tab. That's used really to manage your project and to control some of the options that you have with whatever licensing you happen to have for your particular version of ArcGIS. Again, some of the elements, we have different levels of tabs. This is the Mapping tab. We have different toolbars on each one of these. You can see on the Explore tool, we use that to navigate. So a lot of our features in terms of zooming in and zooming out, full extent, those things are all on the Explore tab. There's some other tabs here. In terms of our selection tabs now are all separated out, so we have all those different select by attributes, select by locations that we typically used in the past. Those are on a separate tab. And we have some other ones, the Inquiry tab, things that we don't typically use but are available. So everything is spread out in a lot of different areas here. We have tabs, and within tabs we have different levels of functions. We have navigation options, so you can see additional applications that are within this particular navigation tab. Again, some of the things we use commonly are some of the selection tabs. We have other options to do selections and to change some of our options within the selection tab. But typically we have tools and buttons that are within each tab. For instance, in this case we have different selection features. We have the bookmarks feature, which we typically use in a lot of different situations. The whole setup of Arc Pro is really based on a series of tabs, panes, and views. So we see here the tabs with different functions within the tabs. We also have panes. So here we have the Contents pane, and because we have multiple panes open, we also have the Catalog pane that are combined with the Contents pane, which we typically see in ArcMap in a little different format. Then we have the Symbology pane. So we can do a lot of different things here with these panes, and beyond the panes we also have different views. So in this case we're showing the mapping view. We could change that and show a layout view. In this case there are two different layouts. So unlike ArcMap, where we had to go toggle back between an actual mapping view and the actual layout, what it would look like if we put that as a layout feature for some type of printout, in this case we can have multiple views on our screen, and we can just toggle back and forth without having to go through sort of the complexity of moving from a layout back to a typical mapping view. So in what we're probably most likely going to see is the Mapping tab. However, we could also add an attribute view. So we in this case, we just open the attribute table as another view, and it'll come up, and we can keep that or we can close that. So it has a lot of different functionality, but again, it takes some getting used to in terms of where everything is and how we move forward. Typically in the pane views, we have map views, we have scene views for 3D visualizations, and we're not going to go into that today. We typically have the catalog view, which we're used to seeing, which shows where all of our data is and our metadata. So we also have a catalog tab, which makes it a little bit confusing, but we have all these different elements here in the catalog, and we can pull up and show those as a view if we need to. We have table views that we just showed. We can have layout views that we also illustrated. So a lot of different functions. It just, again, a lot of this stuff is in different places. One of the things that is pretty valuable that we're going to use all the time in crime analysis is the map tab. So this is where you're going to find tools to use to interact with the maps in your project. In this case, you're going to have, for instance, the navigate tool. We typically use a lot of these features. So it has things like zooming in for a fixed zoom, zooming back out. We can use the scroll feature on our mouse to manually zoom in and zoom out. We can also use the full extent tool to put us back to our original full extent for our particular boundary or map that we have. So a lot of these tools are put together on this particular tab, things that we use on a regular basis that we're probably going to need to have access to. There's some other little features on the Explore tab as well. For instance, we can hit Shift and right click, and then we can basically rotate the map if there's some reason to do that. So there's a lot of other features in there. We can also use Shift and N to put us back to a true north position. So there's some different opportunities to move things around here. The same features are there, but there are some additional functionalities. All these other tabs with things like if we want to bring up a new map, we're not going to do that in this segment, but we can do that, or we can bring up a new layout. We can import a map. We have the analysis tab where we have all of our tools. So rather than having to search in our tool chest, we have them all right here on the analysis tab. We have different, we can also pull different views if we want to add a catalog view as opposed to a catalog pane. We have some of the edit functions here. We can bring in and work with imagery. We can share data. In a separate segment, we'll talk about the crime analysis tab, because some of the tools that they put in some of the functionality of the crime analysis tab are really valuable. But that'll be for another session. And then we have a data tab as well. So we have a lot of different functions that are all now put on this ribbon. One of the things I just wanted to show is the bookmarks tool, something that we're probably going to use on a regular basis. Again, this is pretty cool, but if you haven't used bookmark, it's one way to navigate around the particular area that you're looking at. So in this case, I'm looking at the Cape Cod towns of Barnstable, Yarmouth, and Dennis. And previously I've already bookmarked Dennis and Barnstable, but now I want to zoom in to the town of Yarmouth and look specifically at some of their burglaries in this particular case, and I want to create that as a bookmark so that I can go back and forth. So in this case, we can go to bookmark, we can create new bookmarks. I'm going to type in Yarmouth. I'm going to hit OK, and now if I go back to full extent, I see the entire 3-town map, and if I want to go to that particular bookmark, I can hit the Yarmouth bookmark, and it'll bring me right back to the bookmark in zoom level that I set. And now we have different bookmarks in there for the 3 towns, so we can move back and forth if there's some reason to concentrate on one or the other. And always go back to full extent. So it gives us some other features to work with. The other thing that we have in the map tab is we have the ability to add additional data, and we have base map features. So we hit base maps, and if we're logged on to ArcGIS Online, we have the ability to bring in other things like imagery. So I'm going to just hit that. It's going to be able to bring in ortho photos of the Cape region. Again, these are big files, so it takes a little bit of time. So if we wanted to take off our boundary layer, we could see our burglaries laid out in terms of actual ortho photos. So it's got a lot more functionality built into the ribbons, a little bit easier to find these things. So that's just kind of a basic overview of some of the original features in ArcGIS Pro and how it's a little bit different in terms of the actual setup and the differences between tabs, panes, and views. And we hope that gives you kind of a starting point as you start to navigate around ArcGIS.